All right. Good day, everyone, and welcome. Here with my good friend, Logan Woldridge. How are you today, Logan?
Doing great today. Doing great. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. Thank you. Doing very well. So, Logan, I spent a little time this week reading your behavior change blog article. And so, before we kind of get into it and start talking about it a little bit, I'd like to just define it as you do in the article. And then I'm going to just kind of relate it to some struggles that I've been having recently. And then we can just kind of talk about it from there. Um, so,
Sounds
behavior
good.
change. All right, awesome. Behavior change involves modifying actions and habits over time. It requires confronting barriers and adapting through consistent effort. And I have been really dedicating myself to focusing on my behaviors and my presentation, all these things in the past couple of years. And you stated it in the blog article just how some of the struggles and barriers to that, can be motivation, and you also suggested some things that could kind of get us started to help jumpstart. And I will say that some of the things that I've really been having trouble with lately, and yet I'm working hard to implement, is the self compassion and also goal setting and planning for the future and the outcome that I'm desiring. It's always been a weak point for me. And so I've really kind of committed myself, since going through the article again, to getting specific about my goals, really writing it out and having something in front of me, planning. And so this kind of leads me into my first question here. For someone who feels totally overwhelmed at times by the idea of change and changing long-standing habits, what are some simple yet powerful practices that you'd recommend to kickstart a journey towards sustainable change?
Well, there are three that I would really say you can undertake alone, and then there's one that I will recommend that does involve other people if you can have that. So the three things that anybody can really employ is first breaking it down into smaller steps, right? Any change in behavior can be broken down into smaller steps, whether that be taking the change itself and making smaller changes that add up to that bigger change, or if it just means taking that big change and taking it as degrees of change over a longer period of time.
Mm.
And then you can match that with replacement of a habit rather than elimination. It's always easier to replace a habit that already exists with another habit than just leave a gaping hole, if you will, in your life, right? That makes you feel empty. Nobody wants to feel empty. And then you can also alter your environment to make whatever changes you're trying to make more convenient or less if it has more to do with stopping a habit that's more action oriented, and the one you're replacing it with isn't as action oriented. You could make it harder then in your environment to do whatever it is you used to do. So those three things you can really employ across the board, no matter who you are. The fourth thing I would recommend to anybody really, whether you're doing behavior change to replace bad habits or you're just embarking on a healthier life, is the social support. Find people that you can be around that will support these changes rather than detract from them. And if you don't have that in your personal life, professional, trainer, coach, therapist are these people as well.
Absolutely. Yeah. Okay. And so we all face setbacks, but I've noticed and read it in the article, that treating ourselves kindly, compassionately can really turn those challenges into opportunities. How do you see self compassion turning obstacles into stepping stones for growth? And in what ways do holistic practices nurture that mindset?
Absolutely. Well, holistic practices themselves, I think, can help foster this by giving us a more complete understanding of what every human being is, right? We're more complex than we might think. So that in itself. But then when it comes to how these challenges can contribute directly to success, I believe it has to do with two things really. And one is turning these personal experiences into, or setting them rather, within the grander human experience. Right. So what I mean here is it's always good, of course, and it's pretty much unavoidable that you're going to take it personal on some level. You're going to, meaning you're going to apply it to you. You don't have to take it bad, like take it personal, but you're going to interpret it as, how does this affect me? That's pretty unavoidable. But then beyond that, how do you then say, how is this placed within the grander human experience, not just in my life, but also as all humans experience reality together? We all have to experience different things so that all experiences can be experienced. And I think that's good to keep in mind. And accompanying that, both being supported by it and supporting it, is viewing them as learning opportunities. You can't learn as much from good things as you can from difficult or bad things, if you will. Right? So viewing them as the opportunity to learn what not to do again, rather than, oh, that happened that way, I guess it always has to happen that way.
Absolutely.
However, I also want to add a caveat here that you can take self-compassion too far, and then it can start to create laziness. And we never want to do that to ourselves or those others. So it's important, I think, to pair all of this with supportive but trustworthy accountability.
Okay. Yeah, I would totally agree. There has to be that line drawn between I'm accepting that mistakes were made and things happen, and I'm excusing behavior and just letting myself off the hook on things that need to be addressed. Absolutely. And so, in your experience, what lessons can we learn from nature about making lasting behavior change? And also, does spending time in nature help with the struggle of implementing these changes?
Yeah, well, I think those are two actually very separate questions. But I would say the main lesson we can take from nature, I mean, it all depends on what you're experiencing when you're out in nature, right? So I can't say to this specific experience you'll have in nature, but the one I think universal in an experience of nature is that you learn in general, barring a bear coming after you or a pack of coyotes, wolves surrounding you, to slow down and take the time to integrate things rather than force them in, because nature always takes the time to integrate changes rather than just what's next, what's next, what's next. In fact, it integrates changes so slowly that given the natural time without human interference, it's hard to see from moment to moment any change. And yet, you look at it thousands of years apart, and there will be change. Forests will have grown wider or smaller or larger. Deserts will maybe have shifted, things like that. Events happen, knock trees down, whole swaths of forest get ruined, and they grow back. So that is the one universal I think you will and can take from experience in nature. And as far as spending time in nature, helping with the struggle of implementing change, I believe its greatest benefit is in how it de-stresses the mind and relaxes the body. And by doing that, with all the various, and you can look these up, there's sources all over the place, including our website that lists the exact benefits of that, but to sum it up, the de-stresses the mind and it relaxes the body, and doing so with all the benefits allows for a much deeper connection with what we have done, what we have been through, and then what we learned from both, all simply by spending time in a completely natural environment.
Absolutely. Wow, that's very well put, sir. Very well put. uh, and so, from your work and your experience, what specific techniques do you use that align with the behavior change methods that you talk about in the blog article?
Well, the two that I probably use the most would that are specific techniques would be the environmental convenience. I honestly, if I in the periods when I've lived alone, I don't even buy junk food. If I, when I do, that's eaten. So I'll buy like a bag of chips. I don't buy bags of chips and keep them in the pantry because I
Oh
will
yeah, I'm
eat
the same way.
all bags of chips. So it's honestly just easier not to get all the bags of chips. Or if you do, put them so high up that it's a pain in the ass to get to them. So then you got to go through a whole process just to get them. And then only take so many. Don't take them all. Make it difficult to get more. That is how environmental convenience, as I'm calling it here, works on both sides, really. And not on both sides really, actually. So then on the more positive, you can make it easier to do the other things, such as, again, we'll continue with the bag of chips scenario. Instead of, once you put the bag of chips up on a high spot in the pantry, or you just don't get them, you do get fruits. You keep those out where they're easy to grab. You get nuts. You keep those out where they're easy to grab, right? Where it's more convenient to get those than it is to, I don't want to, I'll just have the nuts. It's easier right now. So that's the one. And then the other is the replacement of habits, right? I find it incredibly difficult to just to just eliminate a habit. And according to a lot of studies and such, I guess I'm not alone in that. So I would recommend the replacement of habits. Replace a bad habit with a good habit rather than just trying to stop doing bad things. And those are just techniques. I also would say that as far as mindset, taking it slow is something that I am always working on, right? I'm always a busy person. I do a lot every day. I like to study and work and write and all this stuff, train. But I'm still working on slowing that down. And sometimes that means giving up something so I can slow down because it is important. And I do believe it is important to give yourself a little time to not do anything. Again, de-stressing the mind, relaxing the body, allowing for those deep connections to take place as much as you can, even without going into that natural environment. And at the same time, it is just proven that by rushing around constantly, we tend to make so many mistakes that a lot of the time we would have made up for, we end up having to redo stuff that really just takes more time a lot. Um, so taking it slow, and appreciating the moment and just reminding myself of that constantly. I always have to remind myself of that. So that's definitely a mindset technique, I would say, more than a physical technique related to behavior change that I always have to employ. And sometimes that means watching somebody else, whether that be on YouTube, motivational type thing, or just some relaxing music that doesn't have, the traditional Asian musics or instrumentals or the classical pianos, Beethoven and all these. So that would be how I use such things.
Hmm.
Meditation, things like that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I definitely the habit replacement is one that's very strong with me. I agree wholeheartedly. I can't just rip something out. I have to replace. There has to be something there to fill that hole that's healthy, or I'm not gonna even be able to attempt it. I won't won't even attempt it. Also, I like the TTM model, the trans theoretical model. I just find that things tend to ruminate with me a lot longer. Learning, all these things, integrating new habits. It just tends to take some time to just kind of sit in and I think it through. I make some mistakes a couple times, and eventually I get it dialed in. Um, so yeah, that's kind of where I'm at with that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And the TTM also allows you to, anytime you need to revert to an earlier stage, that's not a bad thing. It's just, you just do it, you know? That is
Yeah.
part of the process. And so I agree. And I'm actually getting certified in the TTM model at present through NASM. So soon, hopefully, I'll have a behavior change certification on the wall behind me, along with the others, which I know you can't see right now. It's blurry, but there's some on the wall behind me.
They're there, trust me. Yeah, that's awesome. That's definitely awesome. And kind of back to what you said about the mindset thing. I was in counseling and things for a long time that we're kind of promoting these ideas, behavioral change and CBT, all the things along with that. But uh, my mind and I just was not in a place where I could even accept that and attempt that. And even now that I have started working with these things and I'm conscious of them and aware of them for the most part, I still find myself having to check my mindset on a lot of things. Like, oh, I got to get up early and do this tomorrow instead of, I can't wait to get up and start my day, with my affirmations or, whatever the case may be. Just some simple reframing and a shift in perspective of mindset can be huge for me when it comes to those types of things. Um, and then, yeah, the last question I have, finally, for those beginning their journey of change, what message of advice would you like to share with them to encourage and inspire their path forward?
Well, the biggest thing I would say for someone just starting, because in my work and my own self, I found this to be the most common thing, is not to overwhelm yourself. Believe it or not, the problem many people I think are having is not that you're not trying hard enough. You're trying too hard. Don't overwhelm yourself with more than one, maybe two changes at a time. And again, to revisit what I said earlier, break it down, have it be small changes, especially in the beginning, so that you can build that confidence to undertake the larger changes that will take a longer time to fully integrate.
Yeah, I can relate to
And
that for
so
sure.
slow down, right? Remember that. Slow down. And when all is said and done, and let them integrate. Like the forest, like all of nature when you're out there.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. On that note, I think we're going to wrap up our conversation today. Any final words on behavioral change, Hogan?
No, I think we covered everything pretty well today. If you have any other questions, I encourage you to comment. Maybe even come to the website, check out the blog, leave some comments for us there, and let's start a conversation.
Absolutely. Absolutely. As always, we love to hear from you. We love any feedback you may have. And don't forget to check us out on Facebook, Instagram, Marshall Forest Coaching, and the website, www.themarshallforest.com. Thanks, and wishing you progress on your path and good health throughout your day. Have a great day.